Does anybody remember the name Mark Tucker? A few of you should. If not, back in 1992 when the Clintons took office, Mark wrote Hillary a now famous letter laying out a plan to, quote, remold the entire American system into a seamless web that literally extends from cradle to grave and is the same system for everyone, coordinated by a system of labor market boards at the local, state, and federal levels where curriculum and job matching will be handled by counselors accessing the integrated computer-based program. It's a mouthful. 2 weeks ago, edweek.org, I think is the website, published an interview that Mark Tucker did with Gene Wilhoit, who's the head of the CCSSO, which was funded by the Gates Foundation to create Common Core. This is the first exchange in the interview. Mark says, Gene, you played the key role in the development of the Common Core, a remarkable achievement. 20 years ago, our new standards project set out to achieve much the same goal. We did not reach the goal line, though. How would you account for your success? Gene says, you were ahead of your time. The country wasn't ready for this idea politically, and the states did not have the capacity to implement it. But the idea you put on the table 20 years ago grabbed my attention and has been an issue for me ever since. Isn't it cool when people who have called you a conspiracy theorist openly admit that you're right? All of this stuff ties together, right? Some of you may not be aware of this if you're new to the issue, but a few years ago, Utah received $9 million from the federal government to create the statewide longitudinal database system, which is what Jake Andrade mentioned earlier. The UEN issued a press release and called it the P20W system. P is for preschool, 20 is through grade 20, which is basically a doctorate, and the W is workforce. So in other words, Utah accepted federal money to create a cradle-to-grave tracking system of Mark Tucker's fascist dream. Oh, that was the F word, sorry. But you better get used to it because Common Core is the merger of corporations and government. Further evidence that this is truly a cradle move is the new federal database scheme that was recently released. It contains 187 pages of single-spaced line items on what should be tracked on kindergartners and first graders by their teachers, which includes reaching into the home. Yesterday, I went to lunch with 3 bankers for where I work and my boss, and one of them said to me, hey, a couple years ago, didn't you say something about Common Core? Can you tell me anything about it? Maybe. All 3 of the bankers, they didn't know who I was or what I did, but all 3 were experiencing firsthand the nightmares of Common Core with their own children. Unable to help with their homework, having to look for explanatory videos online about how to work a problem, and then being appalled when their own children got the right answer and had it marked wrong for not doing it the crazy way the teacher wanted them to do it. So the good news is parents statewide are now waking up and asking, what is going on and where do I point the finger? This one. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here today and talk about some of these things. My life over the past 11 years has led me to do some things that I never intended to do, but I've developed some wonderful friendships with people like Gail and others that have been so great, and I'm just so appreciative of what they've done and the things we've been able to accomplish. So let me start with this. My dad took this picture shortly after my birth. I know. Implanted within this small nut by its creator is a blueprint for something greater. It's bigger on the inside. Not enough Whovians. All right. So, right, with the proper love and attention, this is what you get. Now, I'm not related to these, but how do animals learn? They mimic their parents, right? They play like an adult until they learn how to be an adult. And it's the same thing for humans, right? If we're the offspring of God, then can we not believe that he's implanted within everyone the craving and thirst for knowledge? And is this not done by imitating the actions of adults and practicing it until we become one? We grow from one responsibility to another. Today I want to talk about something that I've just called it the divergent tracks of education, compulsory education versus free will. Without a doubt, I've learned a lot more since I graduated from high school than I did during my K-12 experience. And so I want to share with you the idea that children can learn more through an environment of freedom, and then I want to propose a pilot test. Compulsory education started in the 1800s in America, but by 1959, the United Nations issued their Declaration of the Rights of a Child, and Principle 7 reads, "The child is entitled to receive education, which shall be free and compulsory." Now, normally when someone says something's free, you think one of two things. They couldn't sell it, and so they're giving it away. Or two, this might be a deal to take advantage of. But I think in this case, it's a bit more like, I'm going to make them an offer they can't refuse. Has anyone read John Taylor Gatto's book, Weapons of Mass Instruction? Just a few of you. You all need to get this book. You will never look at compulsory education again the same way. John was the New York City Teacher of the Year 3 times and the New York State Teacher of the Year once. In this book, he shares this quote. "The first National Commissioner of Education, right at the start of things, declared that self-alienation is the goal of schooling. School disconnects as it was charged to do. It is Caesar's divide and conquer strategy brought to peak efficiency. Children are divided from their families, their traditions, their communities, their religions, their natural allies, other children, their interests, and on ad infinitum. They are disconnected from the experiences of risk-taking and adventure in which the grand discoveries of history have been fashioned." He also shares this quote in his book. It's a letter from the General Board of Education of Rockefeller, a high school dropout, and Carnegie, an elementary school dropout, who both pushed compulsory public education. Here's what they said. "In our dreams, people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. The present educational conventions, intellectual and character education, fade from our minds, and unhampered by tradition, we work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive folk. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or men of science. We have not to raise up from among them authors, educators, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have ample supply. The task we set before ourselves is very simple. We will organize children and teach them to do in a perfect way the things their fathers and mothers are doing in an imperfect way." If that doesn't disturb you, I don't know what will. So as I've pondered these things over the past several years, I've had to engage in some serious contemplation of what it means to be educated, which isn't easy for me because I was publicly educated, and as a result, I naturally think, well, if I did that, the next generation should do the same thing. It's just natural. How you do things, you tend to think that other people should have those same types of experiences because maybe some of it has benefited you. For example, last week, one of our new state school board members posted a question on Facebook to get feedback about a proposal that the legislature is looking at to require a 4th year of mathematics for all students, because there's some positives to that. And a computer science professor from BYU commented that he thought that there should be a required class on programming, because that's the nature of the society we live in. It's a very high-tech environment. Everybody would benefit from some programming and learning logic. And as a CPA, I thought, yeah, and everybody should have some basic economics, Austrian economics, Larry, and be able to understand basic business principles. But the simple fact is not everyone needs all these things, and requiring it of them when they don't have the interest is detrimental in many ways. What's our natural inclination when somebody says, you have to do something that we don't have an interest in? We reject it, right? Sometimes we fight against it. Our behavior changes because our fundamental free will or our agency is violated. And in dealing with free beings, the only way to communicate is through persuasion, long-suffering, and love. Telling students what they have to learn leads to a lot of students who aren't having their needs met, and many of them drop out of school. The Washington Times last month carried an article on Utah's dropout rate and noted that last year it was up to an 83% graduation rate in Utah. That's for white students. For blacks, it sits at 66%, and low socioeconomic students is in the 40s. So 17 to almost 60% of our student population in these groups are leaving school because they don't see any value in the experience. What do we call it when someone else decides what we're going to be, what we have to do, the environment in which it's set, and the duration? What do we call that? Is it education or prison? I think there's a lot of broken adults in society who still expect to be told what they need to do with their lives. We tell children that we have to prepare them for a globally diverse economy, and then we subject them to the exact same common core. A diverse global market demands that children have diverse experiences that allow them at an early age to develop a personal sense of meaning about their interactions with the world. Compulsory education weeds out divergent thinkers. Those that can't conform to a one-size-fits-all mold are told they're failures. How many Einsteins have we destroyed through compulsory education by telling them, sit still, do your homework, get an A? Einstein was a dropout. Edison was a dropout. Ben Franklin went to 2 years of public school and then went into the labor force, which today would violate child labor laws. Heaven forbid a child goes to school only 2 years and then becomes another Ben Franklin today. So how do we expect kids who have never tasted freedom to preserve it for future generations? We're training them that it's perfectly acceptable to tell others what to do with their lives by our very actions. Not only do we embrace this conditioning, but we demand it as a right and then demand our neighbors be criminally charged if they don't put their kids in public school. Why aren't we asking children from a younger age, what do you want to learn and how can we help you succeed? Think about a time when you were really excited to learn something. It wasn't work. You were filled with energy to do it. But when you were required to do something, you probably procrastinated and put it off, maybe even failed to complete it. So I want to propose two things. I know my time's short. First, when we have thousands of students dropping out of school each year, I think we need to completely reassess the value of a public education. We obviously aren't offering something that they value because they're leaving. If there are characteristic signs of the children who are, then we should watch for it, engage them in a pilot program that would allow their school experience to be more greatly tailored around things they have an interest in. And as their interest catches hold, their energy will increase, their desire to learn will increase, and hopefully they'll experience the desire to become something and want to excel in other areas like math and English as they see those as complementary subjects to what they're interested in. Second, I believe that we need to offer much more personalized educational experiences for students. We need to step back to character and intellectual development, which means more time for our children to ponder the things that they're learning. Less assignments, less class time, and more time to engage in thinking. That's where real maturation will take place. They need to see adult role models who have walked the path they have an interest in. We need to bring in mentors from the community who aren't certified teachers, but actually have real-world experience, so those children can say, there's somebody I can identify with who has done something that I actually have a real interest in. Our children cannot be held hostage in a K-12 incubation bubble. They could easily graduate early, and many do, but more could if they saw the vision of what they could become in an interested field. Our whole computer industry was founded by dropouts. Yet they're the ones driving the bus to force everyone through Common Core. Get a degree, go to college. I didn't, but it's good for you. A couple months ago, my ninth grade daughter. She said, "Dad, I'm overwhelmed at school. I don't have any time to think and do the things that I want to do." This is a girl who homeschooled a couple years ago and then said, "Yeah, I think I want to go back to school where my friends are." And I said, "Willow," and yes, most of my kids are named after trees. It's just a family tree thing, so I'm the third. Willow, in order for you to do this, your first assignment from me, your new teacher, is to write a paper on why I should let you homeschool. So the next day, she handed me a paper. This was her conclusion. So basically, it seems like when you have an environment that's less stressful without the negative influence of others and it suits you, the work and study you're doing is less like work and study, and you can enjoy the things you're doing without being ridiculed. You can become a Benjamin Franklin or George Washington or Joseph Smith, always knowing where you stand. I can't prove to you on paper that you can trust me to homeschool, because even then you may or may not believe me, but if you give me a chance, I will show you that I can homeschool and try to do my best. It is my choice and my will that will either lead me to a life of greatness or a life of, well, not greatness. How could I turn that down? I asked her what she might like to do for an art experience, and she said, wood carving. It's like, wood carve? Where did that come from? You can't do that in school. That's dangerous. Sure, let's do it. But I love what she said about when you're doing what you want to, it's not work. It's enjoyable. It captures our interest in our intellect, and we gain energy from it and go deeper. I wish one bold school district in this state would pilot test these ideas and let parents opt their children into such a program and see what happens. I predict that within 5 years, perhaps half the school would be in a similar program, and they would be maturing at younger ages and moving forward with solid plans into fields of interest for their future. What I know is this: compulsory education is destructive to the soul. And I think it's time for an experiment in individualization for our public schools, which will require local control of education to allow schools to develop plans based on the interests of students. Please talk with your legislators about moving us toward local control. Thank you very much.